They tell you that when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. That's not what happened to me. It wasn't my life I saw, it was theirs. All of theirs. Before everything changed, my life was a different story. My name wasn't something you'd find in a phone book, it was a weapon. My job was a shadow. For years, I served in the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. I saw the world in two simple colors, the blue and white of Israel, and everything else. And most of the time, everything else was the enemy. I'm not looking for your sympathy, and I'm definitely not asking for forgiveness. I was good at my job. Neutralizing threats, they called it. Protecting my nation. But the truth is, to be a good soldier, you have to switch off a part of your soul. The part that hesitates. The part that sees a human being instead of a target. I switched mine off a long time ago. I thought I was untouchable. That the darkness I operated in couldn't seep into my bones, but I was wrong. It all came to an end on a mission in Beirut. It was supposed to be clean. In, confirm, neutralize, out. The plan was perfect. But what happened in that dusty, sun-baked building wasn't in any plan. The doctors later told my family I was in the hospital for 30 days. For 17 of those, I had zero brain activity. According to every medical textbook, I was gone. Dead. And in a way, they were right. The man I used to be did die that day. But what they don't know, what no one knows, is where I went during those 17 days. What I saw in that silence and who I met there. What do you think happens when we die? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to hear the rest of this story and others like it, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next. Before Beirut, my life was a series of safe houses. Not just the physical kind with reinforced doors and escape routes. I lived in a safe house in my own mind. My apartment in Tel Aviv wasn't a home. It was a sterile, white-walled holding cell between missions. No pictures on the walls. No books on the shelves that weren't work-related. If I disappeared tomorrow, the only thing they'd find was a ghost's echo. My world was a chessboard. I saw people as pieces, assets, targets, collateral. My job was to know the board better than anyone else. To anticipate the other side's moves 3, 4, 10 steps ahead. There was a cold, clean logic to it that I found comforting. It was simple. Us versus them. Good versus evil. My flag, my people, against everyone else. I told myself that clarity was strength, but there was a price for that clarity. You can't just switch off empathy when you're on the clock. It starts to stay off. I'd sit in a crowded cafe watching families laugh, couples holding hands, and I'd feel nothing. It was like watching a movie in a foreign language with no subtitles. I understood the mechanics of it, but the emotion was completely lost on me. I was a gear in a machine, and the machine was all that mattered. There was someone once. Her name was Leah. She was a teacher, full of life and color in a way that I just wasn't. For a while I tried. I really did. I tried to build a wall between my two lives. But the darkness I worked in doesn't stay behind a wall. It seeps through the cracks. She started noticing the little things. The way I'd always sit with my back to the wall. The way I'd flinch at a car backfiring. The deadness in my eyes when I came home from a business trip. The day she left is burned into my memory. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with this profound sadness, and said, "I don't know who you are anymore, Ariel. And I don't think you do either." She was right. The man she fell in love with was gone. I had killed him myself, piece by piece, for the sake of the mission. That was the last real relationship I ever had. After that, the job was all there was. The adrenaline of the mission, the quiet satisfaction of a threat neutralized. But what nobody saw was the silence that came after. The crushing emptiness of a hotel room thousands of miles from anywhere, the only sound being the hum of the air conditioner. I'd stand in front of the mirror and see a stranger staring back, a tool, a weapon, effective, sharp but hollow, completely hollow. I was a patriot, a protector, but I was also a man who had forgotten how to live. I thought I could keep going like that forever, trading pieces of my soul for the safety of my country. It seemed like a fair trade at the time. But what I didn't understand was that you eventually run out of pieces to sell. Have you ever had to give up a part of yourself for a job or a cause you believed in? Was it worth it in the end? Let me know in the comments. If you're finding this story compelling, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. The next part, the mission that changed everything, is something you won't want to miss. The Beirut file felt different from the moment it hit my desk. It wasn't just another folder. It was heavy. Not with paper, but with something else. A feeling. My handler, Gideon, briefed me in a sterile, windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. He laid out the photos, the schematics, the intel. It was all there. Perfect. Too perfect. In my world, when a plan has no flaws, it usually means you just haven't found the one that's going to kill you yet. The target was a financier, a man named Hassan Al-Fulani. The intel said he was the money behind 3 recent attacks. A ghost who never stayed in one place for more than a night. Yet here we had him, pinned down to a single building on a specific floor at a specific time. It felt less like intelligence and more like an invitation. I pointed this out. Gideon just looked at me, his face impassive. The source is solid, Ariel. The mission is a go. But I saw it, a flicker in his eyes. A hesitation that lasted less than a second, but it was there. He knew something he wasn't telling me. That night in the Beirut safe house, I couldn't sleep. The city outside was a symphony of car horns and distant music, but inside my head it was dead silent. I kept seeing the target's photo. It was a grainy surveillance shot, his face half in shadow. But his eyes, they didn't look like the eyes of a hardened terrorist. They looked tired, scared, like a man running from something he couldn't escape. It was a detail that meant nothing, a detail I was trained to ignore. But it stuck with me like a splinter under a nail. We called it the ghost in the machine. That cold knot that forms in your stomach when your subconscious sees a pattern your conscious mind has missed. It's the instinct that keeps you alive when logic fails. And for the first time in a very long time, my ghost was screaming. It was telling me to walk away, to abort. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years, the part of me I thought I'd buried for good. But I did what I was trained to do. I silenced it. I told myself it was just nerves. I was a professional. I didn't deal in feelings. But what happened right before we left the safe house was even worse. My comms unit, the small earpiece that was my lifeline to the team, crackled to life with a burst of static. And through the noise, for just a second, I heard a voice. It was a woman speaking softly in Hebrew. She said one word. My name. Ariel. It wasn't my comms officer. It wasn't anyone on the team. The line went dead immediately after. My partner looked at me. You hear that? I shook my head, lying to his face. Because admitting I heard a ghost on the radio right before a mission, that's how you get pulled. I chalked it up to a crossed signal. A freak radio wave. But I knew. I knew it was a final warning. Have you ever had a gut feeling so strong it felt like a physical presence telling you not to do something? Did you listen? Let me know your story in the comments. If you need to know what happened when we breached that door, make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell on. Because the truth of that mission is far darker than you can imagine. We moved like ghosts. The door splintered inward with a muffled crack and we poured into the apartment. It was all muscle memory. Check left, check right, the scent of dust and cardamom heavy in the air. My partner Aiden cleared the main room while I took the hallway. My weapon was an extension of my arm, my eyes scanning for any sign of a threat, but the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. My gut, the one I had ignored, was now a cold, hard knot of ice. This wasn't a safe house, it was a tomb, and then I saw him. At the end of the hall in a small bedroom. Hassan Al-Fulani. He was exactly like his photo, but the grainy image hadn't captured the terror in his eyes. He wasn't a hardened financier of terror. He was a man cornered, and he wasn't alone. Huddled behind him was a boy no older than 10, his small hands clutching his father's leg. That was the first revelation. The intel was a lie. There was no weapons cache, no terror cell, just a man and his son. Al-Fulani's eyes met mine. There was no hate in them, only a plea. His hand moved slowly, not towards a weapon, but towards the boy, as if to shield him. My training screamed at me. Threat. Movement. Neutralize. My finger tightened on the trigger. For 10 years that sequence was automatic, but looking at that boy's face I saw a ghost of myself. A child who deserved a father. And for the first time in my career I hesitated. A single fatal heartbeat of a pause. That was all it took. Quote, that's when the universe shattered. It wasn't a loud bang like in the movies, it was a deafening crack right next to my ear. A searing, white-hot poker slammed into the side of my head. I didn't even see the shooter. He was in a side room, a detail we'd missed, an angle we hadn't cleared. And in that split second, as the world began to tilt, the second revelation hit me like a physical blow. Gideon knew. He knew about the boy. He knew this was a setup. I wasn't here to neutralize a target, I was the target. My body hit the floor before I even knew I was falling. The world didn't go black. It slowed down. I could see the dust motes dancing in the sliver of sunlight from the window. I could see Aitan's mouth open in a silent scream. I could feel the warmth spreading from my head, a sticky pool soaking into the worn rug. My last thought wasn't of my country. It wasn't of honor or duty. It was a flash of Leah's sad eyes and a single crushing realization. My entire life, every sacrifice, every kill, it was all for nothing. I had sold my soul for a lie. And then the sounds faded. The light from the window narrowed to a pinprick. The cold crept in from my fingertips, a deep, final chill that went straight to my bones. The last thing I felt was a profound sense of release. The weight was gone. The fight was over. And then, silence. Absolute, perfect, and complete. What do you think is the last thing that truly matters when you're facing the end? Your legacy, your loved ones, or something else entirely? I'd really like to know what you think in the comments. If you need to know what I found waiting for me in that silence, make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications. The truth is more incredible than you can imagine. That silence, it wasn't empty. It was heavy. It had a weight to it that pressed in on me from all sides. The first thing I realized was that the pain was gone. The searing fire in my head, the ache in my bones from 1,000 missions, all of it just vanished. It was like I'd been carrying a massive weight my entire life and someone had finally cut the straps. I felt light, free. Then came the pull. It wasn't violent. It was a gentle, insistent tug, like a string being slowly reeled in. I felt myself lift. Not my body, but me, the real me. I rose up through myself, and suddenly I was looking down. The perspective was dizzying. Somewhere near the ceiling, watching the scene unfold below like a movie shot by a drone. I saw my own body, a broken thing lying in a growing pool of crimson. I saw Aitan, his face a mask of horror, screaming into his radio. I saw the shooter step out of the shadows, his face cold and professional. I saw it all, but I felt nothing. No anger, no fear. It was like watching a story about a stranger. The room began to dissolve around me, the edges blurring like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. The sounds faded first, Aitan's frantic shouts turning into a distant buzz, then into nothing. The colors washed out next, the vibrant red of my own blood turning to a dull gray before disappearing completely. The last thing to go was the image of my own face, my eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Then that too was gone. I was alone. I was floating in a place that had no up or down, no walls, no floor, just an endless, starless black. It wasn't cold, it wasn't warm. It just was. For the first time, there were no orders, no objectives, no enemies. There was only me in this vast, silent emptiness. And here's the third revelation, the one that chilled me more than any bullet ever could. I realized this was it. This was the end. All my training, all my sacrifices had led to this, a quiet, lonely fade into nothing. I had lived my life like a ghost, and it seemed I was doomed to spend eternity as one. I thought about Leah. I thought about the boy, and I accepted it. This was the price for the life I had chosen. What do you think is more terrifying, a fiery hell of judgment or an eternity of absolute lonely nothingness? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you need to know what happened next, what broke that infinite silence, make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell turned on. Because what came out of that darkness changed everything. Just when I had accepted the endless nothing, something changed. It started as a point of light. So small you could have mistaken it for a distant star, but there were no stars here. It wasn't a harsh light like a spotlight or a sun. It was soft, warm, and it was growing. It didn't push the darkness away. It felt more like the darkness was dissolving into it willingly. The silence gave way to a sound, but it wasn't a sound for the ears. It was a low, single hum that resonated deep inside my soul, a note of perfect peace. As the light grew, it brought a feeling with it, a feeling of being known, completely. Every secret I ever kept, every lie I ever told, every life I had taken, it was all laid bare. Not like a prosecutor reading a list of charges, but like a book being opened to its first page. I felt a shame so profound it should have crushed me. I braced for the judgment, for the fire, for the condemnation I had earned 1,000 times over. It was what I deserved. I was a killer, a monster hiding behind a flag, and I waited for my sentence. But the sentence never came. Instead, from the heart of that warm, brilliant light came a feeling of love. It wasn't human love. It wasn't conditional or earned or fragile. It was an ocean of pure, unconditional acceptance that washed over me, cleansing the filth and the blood from my soul. And I knew, with a certainty that went beyond thought or reason, who was in that light. I didn't see a face with a beard and sandals, not like in the paintings. I saw a presence. I saw the source of that love. And my soul whispered a name I hadn't spoken in years. Jesus. He didn't speak in words, but I understood everything. He showed me my life, but not from my eyes. He showed me the faces of the men I had killed. I didn't just see them fall. I felt the shock in their hearts. I felt the love they had for the families they would never see again. I saw the ripples of pain my actions had sent out into the world, a dark stain spreading through generations. And he didn't just show me, he felt it with me. The creator of the universe, the source of all that is, he wept, not for me, but with me. His sorrow for the pain I had caused was 1,000 times greater than my own. He showed me the book of my life, every page filled with violence and darkness. And then I watched as he turned the final page. It was over. That life is finished, he communicated to my soul. That war is done. That man, the soldier, has no more power over you. He offered me a choice, not with words, but with a feeling, an understanding. I could stay there in that perfect peace, forever, or I could go back to the pain, to the broken world. Not as a soldier for a country, but as a witness for this light. He was giving me a killer, a new mission, to fight for souls, starting with my own. And in that moment I made the only choice that mattered. What do you think you would choose if you were given that offer? Eternal peace, or a second chance to live with a new purpose in a broken world? Tell me your honest answer in the comments. If this story is impacting you, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. You need to hear what happened when I woke up. The choice wasn't presented in words. There was no booming voice from the heavens. It was simpler and infinitely more profound. It was a feeling, a deep soul-level understanding. Before me were two paths. One path led deeper into the light, into a peace so complete it would dissolve every memory of pain, every scar I'd ever earned or inflicted. It was an eternal home. The other path, it led back to the broken world, back to a body that was shattered, back to a life that would be filled with pain and confusion. He made it clear. The old life, the soldier's life, was over. That book was closed. If I went back, it would be with a new mission, not to take life, but to speak of the one who gives it, to be a witness. He was offering me, Ariel the killer, the chance to be a messenger of peace. I could stay in paradise, or I could return to the battlefield, not for a country, but for souls. For a moment I felt the pull of that perfect peace. The thought of leaving it was agony, but then I saw the faces again. The faces of the men I'd killed, the families I'd broken, and I knew I couldn't just accept a peace I hadn't earned. I had to go back. The moment I made the choice, the return began. It wasn't a gentle float back down. It was violent. It was like being sucked backward through a tiny straw at the speed of light. The beautiful hum of the light was replaced by a deafening, rushing roar. The warmth was stripped away, replaced by an invasive, bone-deep cold. I felt myself being compressed, squeezed, forced back into something small and confining, and then pain. It was an explosion of every nerve ending at once. The searing fire in my head was back, 1,000 times worse than before. I could feel the cold plastic of a tube down my throat, the sharp sting of needles in my arms. I could smell the antiseptic, sterile scent of the hospital. I was back inside the meat, back inside the broken machine. The first thing I tried to do was breathe, but my lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. A wave of pure physical agony crashed over me, and with it came the first sound from the outside world. It was a sharp, terrified gasp. Then a woman's voice, a nurse screaming in Hebrew for a doctor. My eyelids felt like they were made of lead, but I forced them open. The world was a blurry mess of white ceilings and panicked faces. The steady, rhythmic beeping of a machine next to my head sped up, becoming a frantic, high-pitched alarm. I was back. I had left the presence of God and returned to hell on earth. But for the first time in my entire life, even through the blinding pain, my soul felt clean. If you were given the choice between perfect, eternal peace for yourself or returning to a life of pain to help others, what do you honestly think you would choose? Let me know in the comments. This journey is far from over. To hear about the first thing I did when I woke up and how my old life came looking for me, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. You don't want to miss it. Waking up wasn't a gentle process. It was a violent re-entry. My body was a prison made of fire and broken glass. Every beep of the heart monitor was a hammer blow against my skull. My first conscious thought wasn't of God or of the light. It was of the raw, suffocating tube down my throat. I was drowning on dry land. The nurse who saw my eyes flicker open didn't look relieved. She looked terrified, like she'd seen a corpse sit up on the table. Her scream was the first sound I heard in the new world. It was a fitting welcome. The doctors were a whirlwind of white coats and hushed, urgent tones. They called it a miracle. They used terms like unexplained neurological recovery and Lazarus syndrome. They showed my charts to other specialists, my brain scans becoming a minor legend in the hospital. They saw a 1 in a billion medical anomaly. What they couldn't see was the truth. They were trying to explain a resurrection with the language of science, like trying to describe the sun using only the word yellow. They had no idea that the man they were studying had shaken hands with his own creator just days before. That was my secret, my first and most profound piece of insider information. My mother was the first family member they allowed in. The woman who had raised me, who had watched me become a cold, distant stranger, stood in the doorway. Her face was a roadmap of 1,000 sleepless nights. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of hope and sheer terror. The old Ariel would have given her a curt nod, told her he was fine, and shut down emotionally. But I wasn't him anymore. I saw her, really saw her. I felt the weight of her suffering like it was my own. I couldn't speak past the tube, but I lifted a trembling hand and a single tear traced a path through the grime on my cheek. Her composure broke and she rushed to my side, her sobs shaking my bed frame. In that moment, I wasn't a soldier, I was just a son. But the old life wasn't done with me. About a week later, when I could finally sit up and speak in a raw whisper, Gideon came to visit. He didn't bring flowers. He wore the same impeccably tailored suit, his face the same emotionless mask. He expected to see a broken agent, hungry for revenge on the people who set him up. He came to offer me a new identity, a desk job, a quiet pension. He came to put his asset back in a box. He sat down, his eyes scanning me for any sign of the weapon he once knew. He started talking about payback, about how they had already identified the internal traitor, but I just held up my hand to stop him. My voice was weak, but the words were the strongest I'd ever spoken. "It's over, Gideon." He stared at me, confused. "What's over?" "Ariel, they tried to kill you." I looked him straight in the eye, and for the first time I felt pity for him, not fear. "The war," I said. "My war. It's over." The look on his face was the second revelation. He didn't see a recovering soldier. He saw a ghost, a man he no longer understood and therefore could no longer control. And that scared him more than any enemy. The hardest part wasn't learning to walk again. It was learning to live in a world that suddenly looked completely different. The sunlight filtering through the hospital window wasn't just light. It felt like a whisper of the place I had been. The taste of water on my tongue was a miracle, but I was an alien here. I was a man who carried the memory of eternity in a world obsessed with the next 5 minutes. My old life was a suit of armor that no longer fit, yet its shadow still clung to me. I knew Gideon wouldn't just let me walk away. You don't just resign from the Mossad. Have you ever gone through something that so completely changed your perspective that the world never looked the same again? How did you learn to live in it? I'd really like to hear your story in the comments. To find out what happened when my old life refused to let me go, make sure you subscribe and turn on that notification bell. The first battle of my new mission was just beginning. Leaving the Mossad wasn't like quitting a regular job. You don't just hand in a 2-week notice, it's a blood oath. When I told Gideon my war was over, I knew I was signing a different kind of death warrant. In his world, there were only 2 ways out: a quiet retirement they controlled, or a shallow grave they dug. And I had just refused the first option. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. The worst thing that could happen to me had already happened, and it turned out to be the best thing. The world I woke up in was the same one I had left, but I was seeing it with new eyes. The colors were brighter. The air felt cleaner. I used to see a crowded street and instantly calculate threat vectors, escape routes, potential hostiles. Now I looked at the same street and saw people. Hundreds of individual stories, each one as deep and complex as my own. I saw souls, each one carrying their own secret wars, their own private pain. The soldier's chessboard was gone. In its place was a garden full of people who needed tending. My mother would sit by my bed for hours. Before, our conversations were clipped and sterile, full of things left unsaid. Now there were no walls. I told her everything, about the emptiness, about Leah, about the man I had become. I asked her to forgive me for being a ghost in her life. The look on her face, it wasn't just relief. It was like she was finally meeting her son for the first time in 20 years. We didn't just heal a relationship, we resurrected one. The first thing I had asked for was a Bible. I'd never really read it before. To me, it was just an old book, a piece of history. But now it was different. It wasn't just words on a page. It was a letter from the one I had met in the light. Every story, every promise, it wasn't history. It was a confirmation of what I'd experienced. It was a field manual for my new mission. I read about a God who pursued murderers and turned them into messengers. I read about a love that wasn't earned by being good, but was given freely to the broken. I was reading my own story, written thousands of years ago. But what do you do with a revelation like that? Where do you even start? My new purpose didn't arrive in a flash of lightning. It started with a whisper. A nurse, a young woman named Sarah, was having a hard day. I could see it in her eyes, the same exhaustion I used to see in the faces of young soldiers. The old Ariel would have ignored it, but I just looked at her and said, "Can I pray for you?" She looked at me, stunned, but she nodded. And right there in that sterile hospital room, with my voice still a raw whisper, I prayed. It wasn't eloquent. It was clumsy, but it was real. And when I finished, she was crying, but for the first time that day, she was smiling. That's when I understood. My new weapon wasn't a gun. It was a story. And my new mission wasn't to eliminate threats from the world, but to tell people about the one who had eliminated the threat in my soul. Have you ever found a new purpose in the most unexpected place, completely changing the direction of your life? I would love to hear about it in the comments. If you want to know what happened when I walked out of that hospital a free man, only to find that my old life was waiting for me right outside the door, Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. The real fight was just getting started. I spent my entire adult life learning how to disappear, how to become a ghost. Now I'm learning how to be seen. The skills that kept me alive in Beirut and a dozen other cities, reading a room, spotting a threat, knowing when to leave, it don't serve me anymore. The truth is, my greatest mission was never for my country. It was the journey back to my own heart. I had to die to finally learn how to live. This story, it isn't really about the Mossad or bullets or a mission gone wrong. That was just the fire I had to walk through. This is about the one truth that fire revealed. No one is a lost cause. We all have a ledger, a list of debts we think we can never repay. My list was just written in blood. I thought my only legacy would be the ghosts I left behind. But the light showed me something different. It showed me that your past is where you learn, not where you live. The greatest secret I ever learned wasn't in a classified file. It was that the war that truly matters isn't us versus them. It's the one fought inside every single human soul every day. The battle between fear and faith, between bitterness and forgiveness, between the shadow and the light. For years I fought for a flag. Now, I fight for the person who feels forgotten, the one who thinks they've gone too far to ever come back, because I was that person. My life is a testament that your deepest wounds can become the source of your greatest strength. The peace that was given to me in that place of perfect love wasn't just for me. It's available to everyone. It's waiting for you right now, no matter what your story is. So I have to ask you, what do you think is the one thing that truly keeps people from accepting a second chance? My old mission is over, but my new one has just begun. There are so many more stories to tell, not just my own, but of the incredible people I've met on this new path. If you want to continue on this journey with me, make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell. You won't want to miss where the light leads next.